Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. We stopped here last time, I think, and we were talking about the difference between time division multiplexing and time division multiplex. And we said that TDM is used for downlink, where the base station sends to the different nodes. And we said that multiplexing here means it's one-to-many, and because it's the communication is always initiated from the base station to one of the nodes. Therefore, as we can see here, we don't have any gaps between the time slots. So we don't need these gaps in between the time slots because we're using the same clock for communication every time. So we don't have any synchronization issue. Okay? Whereas for TDMA, the nodes, they send in the upload direction, in which case multiple nodes will send with different clocks, in which case, if there is any clock drift, we need to account for this clock drift by having these gaps in between the time slots to compensate for any drift that might happen between the clocks of these different nodes. So that's the main difference. This is in the downlink and the uplink. With regards to the medium access control, so the connection, the medium access control works in a connection-oriented way, in which case each stream or each connection will be identified using either a connection ID or a service flow identification. So a connection might have different flows. As we said, like a connection is a connection from one node, okay, which might have multiple service flows. Each flow will indicate whether this is a data, audio, video, whatever. So from one node or one host, I may have multiple flows. So that's one thing. The other thing is that for channel access, as we will see in a second, channel access is actually, it uses, of course, TDM or TDMA, right? And there is a very important control information which gets sent by the base station to all the nodes. And this is called uplink map or downlink map. For the downlink map, the base station broadcasts at the beginning to all the nodes to inform all the nodes that pay attention to the fact that I will send you in the first time slot or the second time slot or the third time slot. Okay? The uplink map informs also all the nodes that at this time slot you can send me some information. Okay? So this is the downlink and uplink. And of course, these downlink and uplink maps is where all the intelligence can come to provide all the service differentiation and guarantee quality of service and so on and so forth. Because then the base station, based on providing certain quality of service guarantees, it can assign different time slots to different nodes as needed. In which case I can provide some priority, some service differentiation, and so on and so forth. Again, the actual assignment in terms of what assignment can provide performance guarantees, again, it's not part of the standard. But the channel access mechanism facilitates the fact that you can, through having different assignments in this UL map or DL map, you can provide different quality of service guarantees to different nodes. Okay? So this UL map and DL map are sent by the base station, as we will see, at the beginning of the frame. As we said last time, we have TDD or FDD, which is time division duplex or frequency division duplex. And based on that, the frame is subdivided into within the time or within the frequency, in which case you can send and receive at the same time, but at two different frequency ranges, right? So while the base station sends to all the nodes at the beginning of the frame, at the beginning of each frame, we need to have downlink map and uplink map. And this will represent the information to all the nodes, how this frame is going to move forward. What are the time slots that will be assigned to a particular node in the downlink direction or in the uplink direction, okay? As we will see on this graph. So basically, at the beginning of each frame, as we said before, this is the case for TDD, in which case the frame is subdivided into two subframes. The first subframe is for downlink, and there is, of course, another subframe here. This is for uplink. Okay? And as you can see, there is the gap. So for uplink, we need this gap because we need to perform TDMA. For the downlink, we don't need any gaps, right? So at the beginning, we always have this, which is a downlink IUC. IUC stands for interval usage code. And this has IUC of 0. So this has two parts. This has the downlink map and the uplink map, right? And we always start with the downlink map. So always start with the downlink map. So the downlink map here will give us the assignment of these downlink time slots to the individual nodes. So at this time slot, for example, I need to send to node 1, for example. And for that, we can use DIUC of A. And as we said before, DIUC with a number, this indicates the burst profile, which modulation I'm using and which FEC or forward error correction I'm using. Okay? And as we said, at every frame, we can change the IUC to indicate different modulation level and different FEC. Okay? So that's how the channel access is performed, which is totally different, of course, from the case of Wi-Fi. Here, we don't have any collision. Here, we're just assigning time slots. And based on assigning time slots, we can provide different quality of service guarantees. Okay? We did not talk about how yet, but the fact that we have this type of channel access mechanism will allow us in the future to provide quality of service easily, because we don't have collision in that case, and by assigning these time slots in certain way, we can theoretically provide these quality of service guarantees. So for the case of FDD, you have two concurrent subframes in the time domain, right? And each of these subframes will use different frequency. Okay? So in that case, we have the downlink, and here again we have the map, the downlink map and uplink map, and we have another one for the uplink. So this is the broadcast. So this is what you okay. Will come up. So at the beginning of the downlink, I will send the uplink map and the downlink map, and then you have the two subframes concurrent in the time domain. So in the downlink, of course, any time slot is assigned to a certain node. This means that this is the communication from the base station to the node, and in the uplink, it's from the other way around. As we can notice, whoever has the graph in front of them, they will notice that for some of these terminals or some of these nodes, the frame in the uplink and the downlink, they are on two different time slots, they are not overlapping. Okay? In which case, these nodes are half duplex nodes, which means that even though we are using FDD, but these nodes themselves cannot send and receive at the same time on the two different frequencies. Okay? So these nodes are half duplex, in which case they can send and receive, but on two different time slots. Okay? even if they are using different frequency. So just the fact that we're using FDD, it doesn't mean that we are always full duplex. Okay? So there is a chance that we can I think we can turn off and turn on this way. So we can send on one time slot for one frequency and then send and then receive on another time slot, even if it's on the other frequency. So in which case we have one transceiver, okay, that we can use either for sending or receiving. Because full duplex requires the fact that you need to have two basebands, okay? Two basebands hardware that can work. One of them will be used always for sending and the other one is used for reception, okay? And in that case, you can use two different frequencies to send and receive concurrently at the same time. However, some nodes, they do not have this feature. They cannot do that. They have only one baseband hardware. So they can either use it for sending or receiving. In which case, the way to do this is by assigning two time slots for these particular nodes such that these time slots are not overlapping. They cannot overlap, okay? So the nodes that have these time slots overlapping, this means that these terminals are capable of sending and receiving at the same time, in which case they are full duplex enabled, okay? Which is the case here for nodes like the red ones. The nodes that use the red time slots, they are overlapping, in which case they can they provide full duplex.
Doctor, does that mean that for the half duplex, so we are already using FDD, but then we are using TDD in an indirect way because we
right.
send and receive?
True. That's a good point. Yes, yes. So indirectly for these particular nodes, it's as if we're using TDD, okay? But here, it's interestingly enough, the two time slots could be on two different frequencies. This means basically that you have only one baseband hardware, okay? You can easily reconfigure this hardware to work on either frequencies, okay? But since it's one hardware, you can use it for one purpose at one point in time. So you can use it either for sending or for receiving. This red one here indicates that this terminal is full duplex, which means that it has two hardware basebands, in which case the one block can be used for sending and another block can be used for receiving. Okay, so these red ones, they have overlap in the time. This means that this terminal is half duplex. Okay, any vagueness?
لما يكون في overlap تكون full duplex.
لما يكون في ايه؟
في overlap.
لما يكون في overlap كده معناها this is full duplex.
You just said half.
You
said half duplex.
I said half. Sorry. Since we have overlap here, now this means that this particular terminal, whether this is terminal 1, we don't know here, whatever this terminal is, but this terminal here can send and receive at the exact same time, even on two different frequencies. This particular terminal, for example, this can send or receive, okay? So it can send on one time slot and receive on another time slot. So even if they are using two different frequencies, this is still half duplex. This terminal is still half duplex, right? Because it cannot send and receive at the exact same time. Any questions? Okay. So that's how the FDD looks like. So you have the downlink and uplink map, okay, and depending on whether this node is full duplex or half duplex, you can have the two subframes in the time in two different ways or concurrent based on whether this node is actually full duplex or half duplex. But for sure, in the uplink side, you need to have preamble to be used for synchronization between the different nodes. So this time gap is to facilitate the synchronization between the different nodes in the uplink. But in the downlink, we don't have this. Okay? So that's how the frame is organized. If we zoom in, we can see that, as we said, in the uplink map and the downlink map, the base station assigns the different time slots to the different nodes, right? But as we discussed before, in order for the base station to assign these time slots to the different nodes, what is the prerequisite for this? Huh?
Have a timestamp.
No, I mean, in order for me to assign these time slots to the different nodes.
To receive something from the nodes.
Bravo aliki. That's it. So I need to know the requirements, or I need to know the demands of these nodes first. Right? So, and this can be done in two different ways. Either the base station can perform some measurements, okay, based on certain characteristics from the nodes. Like, for example, I can measure the delay or the range of this node to the base station, okay? Because the further this node is, okay, the lower the throughput will become. So some nodes that are far, okay, will be jeopardized in such a way that the throughput of these nodes might get reduced. Okay? So based on that, if I want to provide some fairness, or if I want to guarantee some quality of service, I should take into consideration this by compensating for this reduced throughput and to assign more slots or something. Okay? What I'm trying to say is that I can get some information about the demands of these nodes using two different ways. Either the base station can provide some measurements or can get some information from the nodes. Based on that, they can use, or the nodes will provide explicit requests to the base station, okay, which is particularly important for the case of multimedia or the case of traffic that requires quality of service, to indicate to the base station that they need certain resources to be assigned to them. Okay? Because I have certain traffic with some guarantees on the quality of service, so I need to make sure that you know that this is my requirement. So for that, we have two different special time slots. One is called initial maintenance opportunities. And these time slots, they will have specific IOC IDs. This one is 2 and this one is 1. Remember, for the uplink and downlink map, we had a 0. So we have 0 and 1 and 2. So these are special type of time slots, which are used for particular purpose. The 0-1, we know it's used for uplink and downlink map. So that one we know. So for 2, this is used for something called initial maintenance opportunities. Initial maintenance opportunities is used by the base station to measure some characteristics about the nodes. Like, for example, the range or the delay from the for transmission for transmitting from one node to the base station. Okay, so this is used for measurements, and then after that, the base station will have some information about what is the best way to assign the time slots in the next frame for these particular nodes. Okay, so initial maintenance opportunities is for sensing what the nodes require. Okay, So it's an implicit or indirect way for the base station to get some information from the nodes. Request contention opportunities is another way, but this is more explicit, in which case the nodes will send explicit requests to the base station to ask for a particular requirement. Like, for example, I can send my expected data rate in the next period of time, in which case the base station either will grant what I'm asking for, or maybe less than that if there is no enough resources. Okay, so based on that, I can control exactly the time slot assignment in the next frame. One thing we notice here is that for those two particular phases, the node experience contention. The nodes here experience contention, which means that the base station will send like a pull to the nodes to ask the nodes to send, either to send some data or to send some information to the base station, for the base station to be able to measure the delay or the range or something like this. Or to pull the nodes to send their explicit requests and requirements to the base station. For both cases, when I pull, I don't pull particular node. I pull in a multicast or broadcast fashion. Okay? So what I'm expecting here is that the nodes will send their requests in a contention-based way. Okay? So these two phases are collision-based. There could be some collision here. Because again, I did not assign the time slots yet. I'm trying to identify their demands. Okay? So one thing I could do is to say, I can pull one at a time, and I can do it in a round-robin way, and you can send me your demands. That's one way of doing it. This is not what the standard says. What the standard defines is that we have these two phases, and both of them, they are collision-based. Okay? So they send some access burst for the base station to be able to measure. Or they send bandwidth requests. And this is an explicit request for a particular bandwidth requirement from the node to the base station. In both cases, they are collision-based. After that, it's collision-free. Right. So those two phases are exceptions, okay, that before I get into the collision-free phase where all the time slots are pre-assigned to the nodes, okay, we have... Oops. Do I have to? Okay. Yeah. Okay, so those two phases are contention-based. So those are exceptions, and we need to know that. I'm not, well, most of the standards, by the way, in order to identify the demands of the nodes, they use collision-based. So sometimes we can think about the collision-based as, why do I have to go through collision? Okay? Same thing for Wi-Fi. It turns out, actually, that collision-based, in many ways, it's actually efficient, and it can provide very high throughput in certain cases. But then it may not be the best way to provide especially guaranteed quality of service. And that's why And for guaranteed quality of service, we need it for particularly for like voice and video and things like that, right? And that's why in cellular networks and in 802.16, they opt to using a collision-free, because this is mainly used or originally used for voice communication. For Wi-Fi, because it's used for data, it's fine. We don't need to have this guaranteed quality of service, and it's originally designed for data, so collision-based would be more efficient in many ways. But then later on, both of them converged into providing diverse services. So Wi-Fi is being used for voice, and cellular network is being used for data. So that's why in both cases, we need to provide especially collision-free, because this is the environment where we can provide more quality of service guarantees, because everything is deterministic in a way. I can assign certain time slots in a collision-free environment. So in that case, I can sort of guarantee the performance, okay? Because there's no collision, there is no randomness, okay? So I have control, so I can provide. So in Wi-Fi, we use pooling. Remember when Wi-Fi we used pooling, okay? And pooling was our mechanism to provide collision-free environments. Here we did not provide pooling. Here we provide a dynamic TDMA. So dynamic TDMA, where we can assign different time slots at different frames to different nodes, in which case I can control which node take certain 1 or 2 or 3 time slots in one frame, in which case I can provide some guarantees. Okay. So yeah, so the next slide actually reiterates on this. So we have the initial maintenance opportunities where we do some ranging measurements, or we determine the delay. So based on these indirect information, we can sort of get the state of each node, based on which we can provide time slot assignment. Or we get some request opportunities for explicit bandwidth requests from the nodes, in which case we can use the information to provide data grants period. In the data grants period here, the subscriber stations, they transmit the data burst as per the uplink and the downlink map, which the base station determines based on these two phases. So these two phases are used for the base station to fill the uplink map and the downlink map with the assignments. Okay? So in that case, the subscriber stations, they have 3 different ways to request or to provide some information to the base station so that the base station can assign certain bandwidths to them. One is to use the contention request opportunities when they are pulled by the base station. Another one is to use the standalone MAC message in the. So in this case, this is for the initial maintenance phase, where the base station pulls the nodes, and the nodes will send some access bursts to the base station, and then the base station can get some information about their demands. Here, we use the bandwidth request, explicit bandwidth request, to the. Actually, the first one here refers to both the initial maintenance opportunity and the contention opportunity. Yes. So the first one refers to the contention request opportunities, and as we said, both in the initial maintenance phase and the contention request opportunity, we can get pulled by the base station to provide information, either indirect or direct bandwidth requests. Here, we can send a standalone MAC message called bandwidth request in the already granted time slot. And that's, so instead of sending my data, I use my granted time slot to send a bandwidth request. Okay? So I can, as a node, I can do that. So I have in the TDMA, in the uplink, I have a granted time slot. So either I send my data in this time slot, or I can consume my, my time slot to send bandwidth request.
There will be no collision.
Hmm?
There will be no collision.
There will be no collision in that case because this is my granted time slot, right? So there will be no collision in that case. So in this first one is contention based, so there might be some collision. Here, it's my time slot, so I can send in a collision-free environment, and I can use my time slot to send the bandwidth request. The third case is I can use piggybacking. Okay? So in my granted time slot, I will send the data, but I can use some of the fields to piggyback my bandwidth request to the base station. Okay? Remember we talked about piggybacking before. It's like before you send your package, just put an extra information into it. So in that case, there's no extra overhead. I'm sending my request with the data. The only limitation with this, which is mentioned in the standard, is that, of course, if you have a standalone time slot to send your bandwidth request, this will allow you to describe your request in a more detailed way, in which case you can provide totally like new bandwidth requests. You can change your bandwidth request completely. In the piggybacking, you can only send your incremental request. So it's like you say, okay, by the way, I'm sending data, but by the way, if you could just increase my bandwidth by one time slot in the next period. Or you can reduce my bandwidth by one time slot in the next period. Something like that. Okay? So I can provide like one field, whether it's up or down. It's like incremental requests. As opposed to here, I can provide a full request from scratch to change all my demands. And here I can provide requests on the assigned time slots. I can provide some requests to describe like some guaranteed performance, whether on throughput, on delay, on whatever. Okay? So here I can give more details, of course, about my request. But here I have some limitation, and that's why I can use this only for incremental requests. I can go up or down a little bit. Okay?
In the last two methods, they do not have opportunity to change the requirements through the session, but in the first it's not possible, right?
Why? No. Here, this phase, no, not per session. I didn't say that the contention request opportunities are once per session. I didn't say that.
No, it's not once per session.
Yeah.
It will be, I don't know, the frequency of
We didn't say any limitation. We didn't talk about any limitation regarding the frequency of doing this. It gets controlled by the base station. So the base station can pull the nodes for any maintenance opportunities or any request opportunities based on contention. Okay, so it's controlled by the base station. So it could be done every like few frames or something.
Because of the, and this can happen for each data packet, the last one.
The last one?
Yeah.
I did not specify that this has to be sent for every data packet. I didn't say that. Again, here, what you could do is that you could send your normal data, but from time to time, you can piggyback your request with the data. From time to time. We didn't really provide any frequency on how frequent this information could be sent. In fact, this is not specified in the standard. It's up to the base station and or the nodes to send in whatever frequency they want. For example, I can send the data, and I can only piggyback the request whenever I want to change. It could happen one time per session. It could happen 10 times during my session. It's up to the nodes. Also, it's up to the base station to also dictate certain frequency on when the maintenance phase and when the bandwidth request phase based on contention will happen. Okay, so it could be every like 2-3 frames. It could be every 100 frames. It's up to the base station. So there is no limitation in the standards about these two things. Clear? Okay. All right. So I think we'll stop here.